Hello everyone, I'm so glad to see you back on my channel. Today, I will continue sharing with you the next chapter in the story of the single mother, Ly Hoai Ca, a journey filled with challenges, yet overflowing with love. In the previous episode, Hoai Ca and Hùng should have been able to step into the wedding hall together, surrounded by the blessings of their families, relatives, and the entire village. But an unexpected incident occurred, forcing the ceremony to be postponed. That moment left a deep emptiness in Hoai Ca's heart, disappointment mixed with fear for the future. Hùng, too, was torn apart, for he had to leave behind his small home, put on his uniform, and rush back to his unit to join the mission of rescuing villagers in the mountains who were struggling amidst flash floods. The following days, Hoai Ca endured the loneliness and pressure as her pregnancy grew heavier. Though strong, she sometimes could not hide her fatigue and creeping anxiety. It was then that Mother Ha, an elderly mother with boundless love, decided to move in with her daughter. She cared for Hoai Ca and looked after little Tony, giving her daughter peace of mind while Hùng was away. Today's story will open new developments, where motherhood, love, and sacrifice are tested once again. Will Hoai Ca be able to hold on to her faith and overcome hardship? Will Hùng, amidst danger, return safely? And how will this small family stand firm against the storms of fate? Let's follow today's episode to find the answers. That night should have been the happiest night in Hoai Ca and Hùng lives. The whole village was waiting to witness the moment the two became husband and wife. The feast had been prepared, fresh flower garlands still carrying their fragrance, laughter still echoing, when suddenly the sky changed color. Dark clouds rolled in, thunder split the heavens, and then rain poured down in torrents, snuffing out the lights and drowning out the festive drums. In an instant, the wedding was thrown into chaos, guests scrambling for shelter, and the joy in Hoai Ca and Hùng hearts was cruelly cut short. Hoai Ca, her 3-month pregnancy not yet showing, sat slumped under the eaves. The rain hammered the tiles, mingling with the wailing wind like the weeping of heaven and earth. Her face was dazed, eyes brimming with tears, staring into the distance in despair. Each tear that fell melted into the cold rain, blurring everything around her. Inside, her faith and hope felt fragile, like a small candle flickering in the storm. At her feet, little Tony clung tightly to her dress, his innocent face watching each teardrop slide down his mother's cheeks. He didn't understand why she was crying, didn't know why the wedding music had stopped. His wide, round eyes were full of confusion and fear, making her heart ache even more. Those clear eyes were like a mirror reflecting her helplessness at what should have been the most perfect moment of her life. Hùng, his uniform soaked in the icy rain, stood nearby. His face was stern, but his eyes betrayed deep conflict. He knew his duty as a soldier would not allow him to stay. Out there, villagers in the highlands were fighting for their lives in the floods, their homes swept away, cries for help echoing in the storm. Between personal happiness and sacred responsibility, he had to choose. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his wife. It was a desperate, tight embrace, as if trying to hold on to the last warmth before leaving. "Be strong, for I will surely come back," Hùng whispered, his voice breaking in the rain. Hoai Ca buried her face in his chest, tears pouring uncontrollably. She didn't want to let go, yet his hand slowly slipped from hers. Then Hùng turned and disappeared into the blinding rain. His figure quickly faded into the darkness, leaving behind the pounding rain and a cold emptiness under the eaves. Hoai Ca sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the direction he had gone, as if just a little longer would shorten the distance between them. The wind howled through the cracks, the rain roared as though tearing the sky apart. In that stormy night, their story opened a new chapter, one full of trials and tempests. The wedding was left unfinished, and Hoai Ca and Hùng were forced to face a harsh trial when the floods suddenly came. After the fierce storm, Hoai Ca's entire house was shrouded in dampness and gloom. The curtains hung heavy with water, the wooden walls cold and lifeless, while piercing gusts of wind howled through the cracks in the doors. Having already endured a night of emotional shocks, Hoai Ca now felt her body drained, so weak she could barely move. Sharp pains throbbed in her lower abdomen, cold sweat beading across her forehead as her complexion turned pale. Mother Ha, terrified, clutched her daughter and cried her name in desperation. Tiu San and the neighbors hurried to help, supporting Hoai Ca toward the car, while little Tony sobbed and clung tightly to her dress. The whole family rushed her to the hospital through the lingering rain, each heart weighed down like it carried a stone. The hospital at night was cold and sterile, neon lights glaring across the hallways, intensifying the atmosphere of dread. In the emergency room, Hoai Ca lay motionless on the bed, eyes half closed, her breathing faint and broken. Doctors and nurses moved swiftly around her, attaching one medical device after another. The dry, sharp beep, beep of the monitors pierced the thick air of anxiety. Outside the door, Mother Ha held Tony, crying and praying, her shoulders trembling with every fearful heartbeat. When the examination ended, a doctor stepped out, his face grim. He spoke in a low, heavy voice. The pregnancy is still small, but signs of miscarriage are clear. The mother is very weak and must rest completely. If she suffers further stress, overwork, or emotional shock, the risk of losing both mother and child is extremely high. Those words cut through the air like a knife, leaving everyone frozen, their chests tight, afraid even to breathe. Inside the room, Hùng stood at his wife's bedside. His entire body was still soaked, his uniform streaked with mud, his hair matted with rain. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless hours, his gaze heavy with anguish, his hands trembling as they gripped hers tightly. Looking at Hoai Ca's pale, fragile face, so delicate it seemed it might fade away at any moment, his heart felt crushed. He bent down, whispering with a trembling voice, "Please hold on, don't leave me. I'm sorry I wasn't by your side. I promise, no matter what it takes, I will protect you and our child." Yet even in that moment, a storm raged within him. Beyond these walls, hundreds of villagers were still fighting for their lives in the floods, their homes and futures being swept away, waiting for him and his comrades to rescue them. But here, in this room, his young wife and the fragile life within her teetered on the edge of survival. Duty and love, responsibility and happiness, both sacred, both tied to his very flesh and blood. Hùng felt trapped at a crossroads of fate, knowing whichever path he chose would carry unbearable loss. The hospital room fell into absolute silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, each pulse a cruel reminder of the fragile life forming within Hoai Ca. Outside, the rain had yet to cease, the wind still roared as if to drown the world. And in that hushed moment, this small family stepped into a new trial, not the storm of nature, but a harsher battle, the fight to preserve a fragile yet precious life, wavering on the razor's edge between survival and loss. Returning to his unit after a night of relentless storm, Hùng could hardly catch his breath. His eyes were dark and sunken from staying awake, his boots caked with mud, and his uniform still soaked with cold rain. He had barely sat down on the edge of his iron bunk to remove the heavy pack from his shoulders when the sharp blast of the assembly horn pierced through the barracks. The urgent sound cut through fatigue like a blade, forcing every soldier to rise, fall into line, and march swiftly toward the hall. In the silence, only the echo of boots striking the cement floor resounded, rows of soldiers moving fast, yet disciplined. The air was taut as a bowstring. Everyone knew that when the horn blared in the middle of the night, it meant an emergency. The commander stepped onto the platform, his stern face carved deeper by lines of worry. His voice thundered, filling the hall. Last night, flash floods struck the northern highlands, triggering severe landslides. Entire villages are cut off. Hundreds of families are trapped, elders, women, and children crying out in despair. This is not merely a disaster, but a fight for survival. Your mission is to march immediately, join the local forces, reach the site at once, and evacuate the people to safety. Their lives are now in your hands. The hall fell silent. No whispers, no hurried breaths. Only the eyes of the soldiers, all burning with fierce resolve. They knew the order carried danger, but they also knew this was the very reason they wore the uniform. In the ranks, Hùng stood tall. His heart clenched as images of Hoai Ca filled his mind, his wife still lying on a hospital bed, her pale face drained of strength, eyes closed in exhaustion. He thought of Tony, their 3-year-old son, too young to understand, clinging to his mother's leg in tears. He remembered Mother Ha trembling as she held her grandson in the hospital corridor. Every thought tore at him, urging him to stay, to be the shoulder his family needed in this storm. But the duty of a soldier gave him no such choice. He drew a deep breath. His reddened eyes lit with a blaze of determination. His fist clenched, and he stepped forward. His voice rang out, strong and unwavering, as if to drown out the storm beyond the walls. Understood. Reporting to the commander, I volunteer for the mission. The sound thundered through the hall, shattering the heavy silence. The entire unit seemed to draw strength from it. In that instant, Hùng knew he bore 2 burdens. One, the love and responsibility of a husband and father. The other, the sacred duty of a soldier to his people. And though the road ahead was fraught with peril, he chose to walk it, for it was the only path his heart and his soldier's oath would allow. After days of treatment in the hospital, Hoai Ca was finally allowed by the doctors to return home. Stepping out of the hospital gates, she looked like a fragile shadow, her thin shoulders trembling under the pale sunlight that followed the storm. Her face was still pale with fatigue, dark circles etched deeply under her eyes from sleepless, anxious nights. Each step she took was slow and weak, yet in her gaze there was relief at returning to the warmth of home, where her little son was waiting. Tony, only 3 years old, was far too young to grasp the upheavals in his family. He still couldn't speak, uttering only a few broken sounds, his voice as clumsy and tender as a fledgling bird learning to sing. The moment he saw his mother return, he rushed forward on his short, stumbling legs, his tiny arms stretching toward her. He clung tightly to her leg, unwilling to let go, his wide eyes shimmering as though brimming with tears. In that innocent gaze was an unspoken fear, as if letting go would mean his mother might vanish once more. Hoai Ca bent down and wrapped her arms around her son. His small body pressed against her frail chest, and her nose stung with emotion. All the exhaustion, all the suffering of the past days seemed to converge in that single moment. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, but she wiped them away quickly, unwilling to let her child see her weakness. Looking into his tender face, she whispered softly, "My son, I must be strong so that you will always have someone to lean on. As long as I have you, I will never fall." In that moment, Hoai Ca realized that a mother's love was her greatest strength. No matter how many trials lay ahead, no matter how long until Hùng could return from the flood-stricken lands, she knew she had to stand tall, unyielding and brave, to protect her little boy and the unborn child within her. When news came that Hùng had to leave for the highlands to rescue villagers amidst the floods, Mother Ha could no longer sit still. She hurriedly put aside her chores, abandoning even the meal she hadn't touched. In her hands were a few simple belongings, yet filled with love: some old clothes folded neatly in a faded cloth bag, a sack of freshly milled rice, a few packets of herbal medicine for nourishment, and the old quilt that had accompanied the family for years. The same quilt she once used to cover Hung during freezing winter nights. Each hurried step along the muddy village path carried both determination and worry, as though she had only one desire: to be by her foster daughter's side at this moment. The wooden door creaked open, and she stepped inside to see Hoai Ca, frail and pale after her hospital stay. The sight of her daughter's weary face tightened her heart. Without a greeting, she rushed forward, spread her arms wide, and embraced her tightly. The mother's arms were thin and bony, yet warm and protective, as if sheltering and strengthening the young woman. With a voice hoarse from emotion yet firm, she whispered, "I will stay here and help you take care of the little one. You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore. Rest, look after your health, and wait for Hung to come home." Those words were like a gentle wind breaking down the wall of strength Hoai Ca had forced herself to build. She could no longer hold it in. All the sorrow, fear, and loneliness of the past days suddenly burst forth. She buried her face in her mother's shoulder, sobbing like a child who had finally found a safe place to lean on. Her hot tears soaked into the familiar scent of her mother, the scent of protection she had longed for all this time. In the corner of the house, Tony was fiddling with his little toys. Hearing his mother cry, he lifted his head, his round eyes wide with confusion. He didn't understand, but guided by instinct, he leapt to his feet and toddled over. Wrapping his tiny arms around his grandmother's legs, his small hands gripped tightly, his bright eyes glistening with both worry and unconscious joy. The sight lit up the small home, easing the heavy air that had weighed over them for days. Mother Hoai bent down, pulling Tony into her arms as well, her trembling hand stroking his soft hair. 3 generations clung together in an embrace, heavy with tears, yet brimming with warmth. Outside, the wind and rain still lingered, but within this small home, a fire of love had been rekindled. At that moment, Hoai Ca realized she was no longer alone. Beside her now were her mother and her son, the bonds of family lifting her up. And from that refuge, her faith in waiting for Hung's return grew stronger, fiercer than ever before. The assembly horn had barely faded when the entire barracks stirred to life. Groups of soldiers immediately moved toward the muster ground under the gray curtain of rain. Their soaked uniforms clung tightly to their bodies, yet instead of slowing them down, it only highlighted their strength and resilience. Hung and his comrades swiftly shouldered their packs, checking each piece of gear: rifles, flashlights, ropes, even dry rations. No one spoke a word, only the hiss of the wind in their ears and the pounding of boots against the cold cement echoed through the night. In that silence, every step carried the weight of duty. When the command rang out, not a single man hesitated. They climbed aboard the military trucks waiting in line, engines roaring like thunder, headlights slicing through the sheets of rain. The sound of the engines rose like war drums, driving them headlong into the dangers ahead. The doors slammed shut, closing behind them the safety of the barracks, opening before them a road of peril and hardship. The convoy rumbled forward, heading straight for the highlands where the raging floods had struck. Outside the windows, the storm still poured without mercy. Heavy raindrops hammered against the glass, streaking down in endless rivulets, blending with the wail of the wind. The road was a mire of mud, wheels jolting over slippery ground. Mountain passes twisted endlessly, landslides scarred the path, fallen trees sprawled across the way. The desolate, Ruined landscape on both sides seemed like an omen of the dangers that awaited them. The camera lingered on Hung's face, sun-darkened cheeks smeared with mud and raindrops not yet dry. His lips were pressed tight, his jaw clenched, radiating unshakable resolve. His eyes blazed with a steadfast light, as if anchoring his heart to the mission. Yet deep within them, for a fleeting instant, flickered the image of frail Hoai Ca on her sickbed and little Tony clinging to her leg, his innocent eyes wide and confused as he watched his father depart. That thought twisted Hung's heart. He longed to be with his wife and child, to shield and comfort them through these stormy days. But the soldier's oath would not let him turn back. He closed his eyes, drew in a deep breath, forcing himself to cast aside private emotions. When he opened them again, they burned with unyielding fire, ready to face any danger to complete his mission. The convoy jolted violently over the rugged mountain road. Rain grew heavier by the minute, the wind outside shrieking as if to tear apart the forested slopes. Yet inside the trucks, every soldier sat upright, their eyes fixed firmly ahead. They knew that hundreds of lives were waiting for rescue. And in the midst of such ferocity, the steel spirit of the soldier shone brighter than ever before. In the pounding rain, floodwaters surged as if determined to swallow the entire village. Hung and his comrades plunged into the icy current, wading step by step through the raging torrent. On his shoulders, he carried an elderly man with silver hair, trembling from exhaustion, while his other hand clutched tightly to the safety rope linking him to his team. At times the water rose to his chest, dragging along mud and rotting branches, yet Hung's eyes never wavered. Elsewhere, a comrade quickly handed him a newborn child, the infant's tearful eyes wide with fear. Hung wrapped the little one tightly against his chest, lifting his head as he pressed forward, determined to shield the fragile life from the fury of the flood. Cries for help echoed everywhere, and even chickens and dogs were carried out by the soldiers, tied with ropes to lead them from danger. Amidst the devastation, the image of these soldiers in green, wading through torrents, guiding the elderly, carrying children, rescuing even livestock, became a beacon of hope for the entire village. Meanwhile, in the small home, Hoai Ca sat by the window. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning splitting the darkened sky. She laid a hand on her belly, feeling the faint movements of the child within. Her eyes, weary and distant, gazed into the void, as though trying to catch a glimpse of the man battling storms at the edge of the world. Tony sat close beside her, his tiny hands gripping hers, his innocent eyes clouded with unspoken unease. The boy could not form words, only uttering broken sounds, but his silence made Hoai Ca's heart tighten even more. By her side, Mother Ha sat close, her frail hand resting on her daughter's shoulder, her steady gaze like a protective wall. She said little, but her presence was the strongest anchor for mother and child in these storm-torn days. Amid the roar of wind and rain, a question lingered, choked with sorrow, yet burning with hope. Will Hung overcome the dangers to return to his wife and child? Will the unfinished wedding ever be continued once the storm has passed?
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người video tiếp theo về câu chuyện của mẹ đơn thân Ly Hoai Ca và cảnh sát Hùng. Mọi người thân mến, thì ở trong các tập trước thì mọi người cũng đã biết là Hùng và Ca hiện tại là đang có con chung với nhau, và bé thì mới được khoảng 3 tháng và đang có bầu thôi. Tuy nhiên là Hùng thì muốn tổ chức một cái đám cưới để cho Hoài Ca có danh phận. Để sau khi mà Hoài Ca sinh con ra thì nó sẽ kiểu ổn định và cô không phải e ngại gì hết. Tuy nhiên cuộc sống này nó không suôn sẻ như mong muốn. Khi chuẩn bị hôn lễ diễn ra thì thứ nhất là bão lũ kéo về khiến cho Hùng và Hoài Ca phải chia rẽ nhau và không thể tổ chức hôn lễ. Ngoài ra thì Hoài Ca còn bị đau bụng, dẫn đến việc phải tới bệnh viện, và Hùng thì phải đi cứu trợ người dân ở nơi cơ quan mới. Vậy thì mọi chuyện sẽ tiếp diễn ra sao? Mời mọi người đón xem tập sau nhé. Tạm biệt.